Okay, we are live. I was having some technical problems here. I just tried to go live a few minutes ago, and everything froze up, but it seems to be working now. This is just kind of a last-minute impromptu live stream. I found myself with a little bit of free time today, so I figured I would jump on and do about a half an hour or so live stream just about what's happening between the U.S., Israel, and Iran, and the regional war that seems to have begun. Well, it's not a regional war yet, but what could easily become a regional war here very soon, and have some pretty dire domestic consequences for the Republican Party if this doesn't go well. I still am a little sick. I've been having some coughing fits. I'm going to pop this cough drop here. I hope for the best. Should be able to make it through about a half an hour before my voice gives out, and I need to take a break. And if I start coughing relentlessly, bear with me. Bear with me. Yeah, I didn't announce this ahead of time, so I'm not really expecting too many people to jump on, but it's about the only time today that I'll have to do this, so let's just get started. So the United States and Israel are currently at war with Iran, launching airstrikes and ballistic missile strikes against Iranian infrastructure and government facilities. It is apparent that the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, has been killed in an airstrike. Apparently, he refused to leave his residence. I guess accepting his fate if the war did start, which he did perish. He was targeted pretty quickly. Now, I think the great miscalculation of all of this is that these kinds of governments are cults of personality, completely dependent on whatever leader is at the top. And sure, sometimes that's the case. Other times not. In Iran's case, I don't believe so. The death of the Ayatollah, I don't think is going to actually be of any real consequence to the course of this war. The Iranians, I'm sure, have prepared for this contingency. They do have a functioning government without the Ayatollah. He actually, contrary to what many people believe, wasn't managing the day-to-day affairs of Iran. Sure, he was its supreme leader, but not really in the sense, not really in the same way that Kim Jong-un is the supreme leader of North Korea. The Ayatollah, I would say he's a senior religious figure within the country, but the day-to-day running of the country itself, I think, really came down to the military and the president. And enough infrastructure, command infrastructure, seems to be intact to where the Iranians can continue to launch ballistic missile strikes against American bases in the region and targets within Israel. Iran also has seemed to have taken the gloves off against all of its neighbors that harbor any kind of U.S. military facilities, and it's striking Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE. I've seen some missile strikes land in Dubai, which actually jeopardizes their tourism industry if these places get sucked into a war zone. Many of these countries are trying to transition away from the oil industry and more towards tourism industry, knowing that one day the oil industry might completely collapse and they have to find revenue somewhere. So none of these countries really wanted any kind of drawn out, lasting war because it jeopardizes their economies. First of all, it jeopardizes their economies as they currently exist, being completely based upon oil. So here we go. Oh man, I don't know if we'll be able to do a half an hour. I'll tell you guys right now, this is not a product endorsement. These things suck. Ricola is much better. Unfortunately, the corner store doesn't carry Ricola. They carry the garbage things, and I figured they might do the trick so I could actually get through this without coughing my brains out. But apparently not. Maybe we'll try too. See if it really helps. But I gotta keep going. I gotta power through. Oh boy. But anyways, Iran seems to be targeting every base in the region, which the U.S. did prepare for. Key personnel had been evacuated from many of these bases. But there are reports of American casualties coming in. Several American servicemen have apparently been killed and wounded already in these return volleys of missiles from Iran. Now, here's the issue for the. Oh my gosh, man! I'm not crying. You're crying. Anybody that's just tuning in, I'm not crying. Well, I do have tears in my eyes, but I'm coughing my brains out because my whole family's sick, and so am I. My little 9-month-old has bronchitis, and she's just getting over it. Apparently, she gave it to me too. So yeah, so the joys of parenthood. But yes, the U.S. did evacuate key personnel from these bases. But here's the issue, and this is what I think Republicans really need to consider here. And this was a huge political gamble on President Trump's part. And this isn't partisanship. This is just the reality. Here's the calculus. This war needed to be over within a matter of days. And I think the U.S. assumed and Israel assumed they could pull that off. I think, again, grave miscalculations were made upon the a Middle Eastern country that was targeted for war. I think the assumption was probably because of faulty intelligence. The Iranian regime would collapse pretty quickly if its key officials were killed. There'd be massive uprisings. Once the Ayatollah was dead, everyone would push him out or push his remaining men out of office, and the war would be over pretty quickly. Iran would be neutralized, and the U.S. could wash its hands of the situation before oil prices started shooting through the roof and American servicemen started to die. Americans have a very low tolerance at this point for American servicemen dying in the Middle East. One of the key things that President Trump ran on was keeping the United States out of situations like this. So a large part of his base assumed that voting for this man would ensure that young American servicemen are no longer killed in the Middle East. Now, these American servicemen weren't killed in IED attacks. They weren't killed by some kind of insurgency. They were killed by weapons from an actual sovereign government. They were killed by ballistic missile strikes from Iranian territory that were fired after Iran was struck first. Say what you will, but these missile strikes they were done in retaliation for missile strikes on Iranian soil. So these American servicemen lost their lives because of that. Now, fortunately, when you're in the military, that's the risk you take. But here in the States, again, as I mentioned before, there is a very low tolerance for American servicemen dying in the Middle East because of anger over the Iraq War and the Afghanistan debacle. The Iraq War being launched on false pretenses and served no one's interests but a certain party in the Middle East and Afghanistan. We left and the country fell to the Taliban anyway, so it was all pointless. Nothing was really accomplished in either war, and many Americans lost, fathers, brothers, and sons. That's just the reality. There is a deep resentment towards the American government for what happened in this country. So there's little taste here in the U.S. for lives being lost in a protracted war against another Middle Eastern country. And several American servicemen have already been lost. Iran has also closed the Straits of Hormuz to any kind of traffic. I think up to 150 plus oil tankers are currently anchored, trying to get through the Straits or waiting to get through the Straits. Now, the risk here for Republicans, especially the Trump administration as a whole, is that if Iran holds on long enough and this war lasts for weeks, if not months, which I think the Iranians are probably prepared to do so, they saw this coming despite being engaged in negotiations, then there's a good chance that oil prices will skyrocket to $150 a barrel or higher. Now, if that happens, oil prices here in the United States are likely to spike. Now, Americans being in the dire financial straits that they are, while we're also being told the economy is drastically improving, if oil prices spike and gas prices spike because of it, and say gas goes up to $3, $4, $5 a barrel, then this war will negatively affect American citizens. This is how Americans actually see this war with Iran. Most Americans. This is not something that directly benefits us. The only consequences that this war could have towards Americans are negative. Rising gas prices and dead American soldiers. And again, if gas prices go up and Americans begin to be even more financially inconvenienced than they already are. Excuse me for these cough drops. I think I think they're helping a little bit, but if Americans become very financially inconvenienced because of this war, it doesn't bode well for the midterms. Now, also too, much of Trump's base is already furious with him because we're becoming involved in another war in the Middle East, a war that he himself advised against for the last 10 years, and now it looks like we're involved in it nonetheless. So there is going to be some animosity and anger towards this administration because of that. And also, if gas prices start to go up and Americans are negatively impacted by this financially, then again, that doesn't bode well for the Republicans in the midterm. This is a very risky decision made by the president because of the potential domestic consequences for him here. And the Iranians aren't stupid. They understand American politics. Most of the world actually kind of gets American politics. Leela, don't you jump up behind the computer. Oh, my God, I got to grab my cat before she unplugs everything. Hold on. Come here. Here, Leela, you want to hang out with me? Woo! Say hi. Say hi, everybody, Pila. Say hello. You want down? Okay, get down. All right, let go. Thank you. Where did I leave off at? But as I mentioned before, there's just really no upside, I think, to the average American for this war to happen. And the Iranians, again, they understand American politics. Most countries opposed to the United States or its objectives or its geopolitical objectives understand how American politics works. They know that the American people have little stomach for a protracted conflict, and the general mood in America is that we don't want involved in these things anymore. So the calculus would be hold on for as long as possible, cause oil prices to spike, do as much damage as they can within the next few weeks, and make it obvious to the Republican Party and the Trump administration that this war continuing is political suicide for them. It's causing oil prices to spike, and American citizens or American soldiers are being killed, and Israeli infrastructure is being destroyed. Also, too, a protracted war causes resentment amongst the Gulf states, who are reliant on tourism for a large part of their income. And if it freezes, if it hurts oil exports or their infrastructure begins to be damaged, or they're very severely inconvenienced by all of this, well, then they start to really pester the United States and Israel about, this needs to wrap up now. We can't afford for this to continue. We don't want drug into this. And what I'm assuming happened here, there were probably promises made to many of these Gulf states. First of all, the Gulf states are duplicitous. Everybody knows it. Their leaders are unpopular for a reason. They don't really have any great moral standards for the most part. They exist to make money, to keep their economies afloat, and they'll do whatever is in their own interests to ensure that the status quo continues in the Gulf states. They're not really interested in some great ideological fight against the United States and Israel like the Iranians are. And a lot of people know that. Now, their own citizens know that as well, and their own citizens have a decent amount of resentment against them for that. So there's a lot of risk being taken here. And the Iranians, and I'm just saying this from an objective standpoint, it's pretty obvious what their best course forward would be if they wish to inconvenience the United States as much as possible. It's to hold on as long as they can and cause as much damage as they can. And they seem very well prepared to do this. And this is why I don't really understand the calculus being made in the Trump administration. They had to have been aware that the Iranians are competent enough to hold on for more than a few days. The government is complex and efficient enough to keep making decisions without the Ayatollah or without several members of their upper leadership. And they had to have known that closing the straits, causing oil prices to spike, and doing as much damage in the next few weeks as they possibly can is something that's going to possibly irreparably hurt the Trump administration at home. So from the outside looking in, if I was advising the Trump administration, I would say the risks here are not worth the effort. they're not worth it. They're worth it to Israel, possibly, because Israel then gets to finally possibly eliminate its one regional nemesis, and the United States at that point may get to finally leave the region now that Israel would be satisfied that its main opponent has been eliminated. But that doesn't seem to be what's going to happen. So I don't think anybody is really going to benefit from this, especially the United States. This seems to, from my perspective, looking, and if I was advising the president, I would say that the risks aren't worth it. The Iranians are going to be very prepared for this. It's going to be very hard to hit all their launch sites and all their drone launching sites. They've had months to prepare for this war. They're going to be able to do a lot of damage to the world economy, to infrastructure within the region. They're going to hold on long enough to cause the Gulf states to become very impatient and angry that this war is happening. It's going to hurt the tourism industry. And frankly, negotiations should have continued as long as possible. And bringing the hammer down in such a fashion wasn't going to have the desired effect. Iran is not Venezuela. Every nation can't be dealt with using the same playbook. I think people in the West have this idea that, well, if a country's totalitarian, it's a dictatorship, they all work the same way. Just take out the supreme leader and all the people will rise up and fight back, take control of their country, and everything will be fantastic and wonderful. And then I think people kind of discount or dismiss this idea. Let me just lay this out here. As an American, I can say right now, no matter how much I despised my government, okay, like the Biden administration, no matter how incompetent and foolish and terrible I thought they were, if the Chinese started dropping bombs on the United States, well, at that point, I would know what side I would pick. No matter how much I don't like my current government, I'm not going to betray my country. And there's going to be a great deal of Iranians that might not like the Ayatollah, might not like, and I've actually seen this voiced by some Iranians that were no friends of the Ayatollah and no friends of the current regime. They have two choices: either civil war and chaos, or they hold their nose and fight for their current government and at least preserve the status quo and probably save more lives in that way. Because this might be the only route that they can take where they don't fully betray their country. There's a lot of Iranians that are going to make the decision to probably fight for their government in a protracted conflict, simply because they're watching their friends and neighbors get killed by American and Israeli airstrikes. This has to be taken into account. Every single Middle Eastern country that has been invaded by American forces has faced significant opposition from the domestic, from the populace, despite how unpopular that leader might have been before the invasion. Okay, Saddam, not exactly popular within Iraq by 2003. Didn't matter. A lot of Iraqis decided that American soldiers being on their soil wasn't worth it, and that it was better to fight them than to simply allow them to prop up a government according to their design and not according to the design of the local populace. This is how people in the region think. And you would think that American administrations would understand this by now. Now, I'm not saying this on here to come off as like anti-American. I'm not really part of that whole group of, what's his name? The MAGA communist guy who, what is his name? Like, I'm not an activist like these people. I just look at geopolitical issues for what they are and do my best to make the most realistic analysis that I can. I am not on here to advocate for one side or the other. I'm just being as realistic as I can be with the facts that were given. And from my perspective, this war just doesn't seem to be worth it. The calculus just doesn't make sense. The potential consequences are too dire. The Trump administration is already on shaky ground. If American gas prices really start to rise, then the blame will be levied at Trump for it because of an unnecessary war that we never needed to be engaged in. Opinion against the state of Israel is also starting to rise here in the United States. That seems to be unstoppable. It's not reversing. And it just, again, it just doesn't seem necessary to me to get involved in this conflict because of the potential consequences. And there's no guarantee that the Iranian government would have been decapitated and fell apart within a matter of days. They seem prepared to fight on and continue fighting on. And this has also inflamed quite a bit of people in the region. From what I understand, there are riots happening at the embassy in Pakistan, and between 10 to 20 people have already died trying to break into the embassy and destroy it. Again, there seems to be a miscalculation on how people in the region would react to this war, and this is something that I think could spiral out of control. So, could this be over in a matter of days? Could I be completely wrong about my analysis? Yeah, anything could happen. There could always be something unforeseen behind the scenes, something that I don't know, something other people don't know, maybe something the president is privy to that we're not privy to. That allows them to achieve their objectives and end this war quickly before it really starts to negatively impact the American people. But from my perspective, from a neutral perspective, from someone who's looking at information coming from all sides, and someone who has studied the region for quite some time, I feel like my analysis on this is probably correct, and that this war will not be over quickly. It will continue for some time. The Iranians are much more competent than they're being given credit for. They'll be able to do a lot more damage, and they are going to receive a lot of damage in return. But they'll do quite a bit of damage. I think that other countries in the region, the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, will begin to lose their patience with this war. They'll face significant pushback from their own people about American and Israeli presence in the region and being sucked into a conflict they didn't want to be party to for a cause they don't agree with. And I think at some point, the United States is going to have to find an off-ramp. The Trump administration is going to have to find an off-ramp before this really starts to hurt them politically. So those are my thoughts on it. Could be wrong, but as far as like real public opinion about this, I know X is not really a good reflection of public opinion. Like, X is its own little world sometimes, and I think it makes certain positions and opinions seem more widespread than they really are. It makes people feel a lot more political than they really are because there's a lot of activists on there, and the average person is kind of apolitical here in the United States, believe it or not. But once the gas prices start to rise, once people become inconvenienced, and once American soldiers come home in body bags, and I think that's when the average American will go, wait a minute. This isn't what we were promised. This isn't what we were told. Oh, wait a minute. Let's pump the brakes on this because I feel like we're going right back to 2003 again. And what we're being promised is not being delivered on yet again. Now, will the Chinese and the Russians get directly involved in this? I highly doubt it. Iran is an ally to those countries, but the Russians are very pragmatic about their allies. I think there's only it's funny enough, I think there's only two countries that the Russians actually would go to war over or go to join a war with to help defend. And it's probably Belarus and North Korea. Belarus, because it basically is an official province of Russia. I think everybody knows who really influences Belarusian politics. It's part of the Union state. I think Russia would probably annex Belarus rather than let it fall to the EU or officially annex it. And then North Korea, simply because Russia has a defense compact with them, I believe, and North Korean troops fought with the Russians in Kursk to expel the Ukrainians. But other than that, Russia, I don't think will get on board with any kind of direct war on the side of Iran with the West and so China. I don't think either nation views Iran as important enough to them where they would get directly involved in any kind of war on their behalf, although I could be wrong, but they will offer them ISR, technical support, intelligence, satellite imagery. It's the name of the game. This is how the great powers behave with each other. I mean, we might shake hands in public and be diplomatic, but, we're always maneuvering behind the scenes to hurt each other in some capacity, either through, proxy wars or, direct conflicts or, supplying intelligence to, each other's perceived enemies. So I think the Russians and the Chinese will probably offer that kind of support to the Iranians, and maybe some material support as well, air defense missiles, ammunition, and whatnot. But as far as direct support, like Russian planes shooting down American cruise missiles, or the Chinese doing the same, I don't think so. I think they're the Russians already are busy enough with Ukraine and preparing for potential conflicts with Europe to, I think, really give the Iranians too much time. Hello, what's the white flag here thing for? Who are you? What does this mean? Anyways, so no, I don't think they'll get directly involved. Who is this? Hello. Who am I? I was trying to read your name. Who is in my chat? Hello. Who is this? Where are you from? I'm just curious. Good. Who is this again? Anyhow, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens and how this all plays out. I'm not giving out my name. Sorry, not gonna happen. There's a lot of pretty crazy people on here. What's funny? I actually got threatened by a anti-Ayatollah activist, which I thought was humorous. Again, just like giving some basic analysis on this situation. And I think people are so politicized that they assume that anybody talking about something must have a side on it. And I just mentioned before in a previous video that I think the Ayatollah's government had a little bit more support than assumed, and they could probably hold on a lot longer than American intelligence was giving them credit for, and they're probably much more prepared for any kind of protracted conflict than people would think. And I got some pushback for that. Somebody told me basically I got what I deserved and I should die. I mean, sorry, would you rather people be honest about the cause they're fighting, or would you rather them kind of blow smoke up your ass and give you a rosy picture of something that doesn't seem to exist? I mean, this is the issue with the Iraq War too. I mean, looking back, when people were actually trying to tell the Bush administration that you're making a very bad miscalculation here on the resolve of people in the region to fight you. They're not going to see you as liberators if you're there for longer than a month. They're going to see you as an enemy, and they're going to fight you. And people were saying, "Oh, you're anti-American, you're anti, military, you're I don't know what you want to call it, a traitor or something." And well, it turns out the people who were saying that were actually right. They were just being honest. And I think any administration, when making decisions, definitely needs to have people around them that are going to be brutally honest with them about the situations they find themselves getting involved in. So, yeah. My view on all this is just from an outside observer. I'm not going to come on here as an activist over this conflict and openly cheer for one side or the other. I'm just being honest about the potential consequences of this conflict for all sides. My position is that the Iranian regime is much more entrenched than I think people assume, much more militarily competent than people assume, and probably has a plan based off of political observations in the United States to do as much damage as they possibly can to the Trump administration. That is my position on it. Does Iran have its own severe internal problems? Do people have issues with this government within Iran? Is it generally unpopular because of decisions being made within the country? Yeah, from what I understand, that's entirely true. But that also doesn't mean that if you bomb the country, the citizens are going to rise up against the country and overthrow it. This is the weird calculus that people were making with Russia too over Putin. Oh, if Ukraine just launches a bunch of ballistic missiles into Russia and kills some civilians, then people are going to rise up against Putin and kick him out of office because you're bringing the war to their doorstep. And it seems, no, it's the opposite. The Russians have resolved themselves to finish the war one way or the other because of it. They view Ukraine as even more of a threat to themselves than they did before. It's the psyche of people. That's how they work. Most people don't betray their countries, even if they don't like the government. So even if you start lobbing bombs at a country whose government's unpopular, that doesn't mean someone's going to go out and assassinate the president because you're lobbing bombs at their towns and killing their civilians, they're going to blame the people that are actually lobbing the bombs. Like, I don't understand what's so hard about this, and why Western intelligence seems just to get this wrong time and time again. Like, you think we'd have smarter people that actually understand how human beings work and function in our halls of government, that when decisions like this are made, they actually take that into consideration. So I don't know, but we'll see how this war plays out and what actually happens. Israel wants Iran gone for its own, geopolitical machinations. Because that is the last, regional power that's, actively resisting them and what they want to build in the region. Everyone else seems to be at least willing to tolerate Israel or do business with them, except for the Iranians and their proxies. So they want them gone. They don't really care how it's done, and they don't care if it hurts America politically to do it. They just want it done, and they view this as a matter of their own survival. So they'll do whatever is necessary to achieve that. And I think people need to understand that. From what I understand, the Iranians were assuming the negotiations were continuing, and they had all gathered together to talk about this, or talk about these negotiations, and that's when they were struck. And this is the second time this has happened. There's very little honor in geopolitics, and I think actions like this just kind of facilitate mistrust between everybody. Now, as a Christian, I think you should act honorably. I think, if you're in the middle of negotiations, you don't kill the people you're negotiating with. I think that's dishonorable behavior. Now, does that behavior help you win the game, so to speak? Yeah, sure. War's not fair, but also too, at the end, if you engage in that behavior enough and people can't trust you, they won't negotiate. If you're in a situation where you desperately need to negotiate with another country and they know you're duplicitous, why would they? And that's what Israel and the United States need to watch out for. The United States is currently trying to negotiate with Russia in good faith to end the Ukraine war, because it's something that President Trump desperately needs to do politically before the end of his second term. And the Russians don't trust the United States at all because of what just took place in Iran. Why would they negotiate? They have 5,000 or 6,000 nuclear warheads. Taking out Putin isn't going to collapse the Russian government, and they have much more military assets left to use than I think many people realize. There's quite a few people in NATO now that are coming to the realization publicly that Russia has enough forces on hand still to engage in a major conflict with NATO while fighting in Ukraine. That's just the way it is. But if no one can trust the United States on the negotiating table, then why negotiate with the United States? And then even if they do, they're always going to plan for betrayal from the United States. I mean, again, honor is still important. You can be a geopolitical realist as much as you want, and I am a geopolitical realist. But at the end of the day, being honest and honorable is beneficial to a degree. You still need to be. It helps your friends trust you. It helps defeated enemies to trust you. I think Japan was treated fairly honorably at the end of World War II, despite being nuked twice, and despite how bloody and brutal that war actually was. There was no love lost between American and Japanese soldiers fighting in the Pacific. Sometimes prisoners were never taken. Prisoners were executed on both sides. It was pretty bad. And now we find ourselves having a very powerful ally within the Far East. I think because Japan was treated fairly magnanimously, after the war, we didn't, gather the emperor and the heads of the Japanese state together and fool them into being executed or destroyed. We gave them the chance to surrender and then treated them as respectfully as we probably could have done. Same thing with Germany too. So acting as a brutal pragmatist can only get you so far, and before it actually, I think, starts to negatively affect your foreign policy goals. But anyways, I think I'm gonna end this live stream here. I'm gonna hop off. I don't know why this person was asking what my name was again. With the Iranian, like the pro-revolutionary Iranians, like the ones that are like the pro-democratic. I've seen them lash out pretty horrendously at people on X. If they're even of the opinion that the America shouldn't be involved in this war. I see them threaten people with death and whatnot. And I don't really understand why. I'm not an Iranian. I'm an American. Well, I'm not obligated to be involved in your conflict. Hey, look, listen, if you're a citizen of any country and you don't like your government and you think a violent revolution is the last chance that you have or the last option that you have to fix your country, well, that's your business, frankly. It's nobody else's. I mean, if America, God forbid, were to descend in some kind of horrendous civil war, I wouldn't expect some Chinese guy on YouTube to be involved in it and cheering it on or supporting one side over the other. It's nobody's really business, but their own. But anyways, I'm gonna hop off here. Really struggling to speak at this point. Really trying not to cough. So hopefully this cold or whatever this is finally gone in the next few days, and I start feeling better. I'll be back Tuesday or Wednesday with another video, something a little bit different, kind of mixing. Well, I'll just say what it's about here. So like the new Game of Thrones series, Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, there's a figure in it that I think is, well, a fictional character, of course, kind of represents this archetype that everyone has in their head for the righteous and the good king, the good leader, the kind of leader that everybody wants. And I just kind of want to talk about the tragedy of his character and why characters like this exist in cinema and where they come from, and why I think everybody yearns for the righteous and good king deep down. They want somebody with authority that they can trust to make good decisions for the better of their people and their country. But anyways, if you enjoyed this live stream, give it a like. After this is over, it'll be up for people to watch, since not a lot of people were on today. This was kind of last minute. Didn't really plan this out. Didn't announce it ahead of time. But anyways, everyone out there, have a good one, and take it easy.